Welcome to That Autism Thing. You can find out more information about autism and Aspergers by visiting the National Autistic Society website, where they have some really great information, tips and support to help you if you live with somebody with autism or you think you might have the condition yourself. Welcome to episode 4 of That Autism Thing. My name is Callum Ronan and I'm a radio producer and I also make podcasts for a living. This episode of That Autism Thing is a little bit different. Usually I sit down with somebody and we have a chat or a conversation around what is autism and Aspergers to them. However, because of Storm Dennis and Storm Kira, it's been a little bit more difficult this week to sit down with somebody and have a conversation with them. So instead, I've turned to communities like Reddit and Twitter and asked them to ask me questions. And hopefully we can find out a little bit more about what is autism to you and I. So I've got all the questions up in front of me and we'll get started on Reddit with the Reddit user Stump Jumping Jeffro, who asks, do you like trains? I grew up with quite an obsession with trains thanks to Thomas the Tank Engine and the fact that I had a box which was shaped like Thomas that I would take to school every day, carrying all the different characters from the Thomas the Tank Engine universe. And believe it or not, and it's a story that when I get my mum and dad back on the podcast again, I'll make sure we go through, which was that I was very keen on detail and I wanted to make sure that every train was in the box, in the right order, colour coordinated. So my mum had to leave a little note inside for the teachers at the specialist silk school that I went to make sure they were back in the right order, or I would get very upset or a little bit distressed from it. And that was how obsessive I was about trains. I absolutely loved them as a kid. As an adult now, I do use the trains a lot. Unfortunately, I don't have as a big obsession as I did when I was a kid, but I still love to go on a train ride to, say, the East Coast up towards Scarborough, or have a day trip to Manchester to see some old friends. Staying on Reddit, user Coffee Mug asks, do I have any special abilities? I think I've got 2 special abilities. One is camouflaging. So that's where I'm really good at being able to cope in environments like networking or social situations and be able to camouflage my autism. So being able to read the room really well in how the conversation's going or what to say or what not to say in social situations. And I think I've got better as that as I've grown up as a teenager and into an adult. And as an adult now, I'm really good at being able to cope in situations where there might be lots of people chatting and talking around me, or if it's a really sensitive subject or topic, being able to really use empathy quite well. So I think that's one of my special abilities. The other one as well, which I find tends to happen in social situations, is if I'm ever in a restaurant or somewhere where there's music playing and I'm with mates, I will mysteriously perk up when I hear a track, and I'll know exactly what that track is, the name of the artist, and also maybe what era the track comes from. And I seem to have a weird human ability of being able to be like music services like Shazam, where I'll be able to go, it's this artist that sang this, or it's this, it's this band, or it's from this era. And I find that to be a really quirky ability sometimes, because I'll be in social situations where I'll go, this artist's playing right now. And they'll go, that's really cool. Thanks for that. I quite like that track. And they haven't actually had to get their phone out to Shazam it. So for me, that is probably one of my weird, quirky special abilities that I have as well, is in social situations. When I'm really calm and relaxed, I can tell you the artist exactly. So thank you so much to Reddit user Coffee Mug for that. He also says as well, And if I had some kind of autism, I would not have the bravery to do a podcast about it. So props for that. Thank you so much, Coffee Mug. You're listening to That Autism Thing, a candid conversation from the eyes of people who care and support. So I'm going to check through a couple of messages that we've got through on Facebook. And hello to Tom, who asks, do you think that people in the industry look at you differently because of your autism? So I think this is particularly aimed at radio and podcasting. I don't think people look at me differently, and I'm quite happy about that. In the sense, I think everyone treats me with the same respect as the next colleague along as such. And I've never really had any trouble where people have treated me differently or thought of me differently. In fact, I think I've had a few people who've embraced sometimes the quirkiness or the thinking outside of the box that sometimes autism brings. And I think that's to me, that's a really great thing to see and hear in the industry, is that I'm treated the same as the next colleague along or the next producer or presenter. I've never really had any trouble at all in both industries. It's more people embracing my different way of thinking is probably the best answer I can give you. Hello to Harry on Facebook as well. He says he loves the series, and his question is, when did you first realise you had autism? Or have you had a moment where you felt different to others? So I would say I'll go with the first question, which is, when did you first realise you had autism? And I've been to a couple of different schools. I didn't go into mainstream education till year 2 in the UK, which is sort of primary school, or I would say it might be like elementary school in the States, if you're a listener in the States. And it was when I went into mainstream education that I knew I was a bit different. Whereas going to a silk school or a specialist school for people with autism, I didn't feel different there. But it's when I went more into primary school that I felt different. And it wasn't until later on that that difference became a bigger problem. And we've actually discussed it quite widely in the podcast so far about it. But actually, I would say it was more being a kid that I first recognised that I'm probably a bit different to everyone else, but different isn't broken as such. So I think that's probably the first time that I recognised that I'm a little bit different, or when I realised that I'm probably different. And there's been a couple of times where a couple of moments, particularly, I think it's more of a struggle when you're a teenager, when you realise those differences can also cause problems, especially in friendship groups, where you might struggle with an idea or a trend is probably the best way of thinking about it. Struggling with trends or how your friends move on, and, you know, they might go and get girlfriends or things like that, or boyfriends. And it's sometimes, you know, you feel different when you can't sometimes think the way that they do, or certainly peer pressure doesn't help with that. So there have been more moments, I would say, when I was a teenager and when I was younger, that those differences really came to light and really made me struggle a bit. As an adult, you still have those occasions, but they're less rare now because there's a lot more people with acceptance. So hopefully that answers your question. I know it's a bit long-winded. You're listening to That Autism Thing, a candid conversation about autism. Hello to Reddit user Gunnut0508, who asks, what's it like from your point of view? Do you feel physically different, or do you feel fine? Now, I'm somebody who is of the strong opinion that autism is an invisible disability, so you never really have anything physically different about you. It's more about what happens mentally. So what I mean by this is that when you're in social situations, so say you go to a networking event or a party, or you go out and about in town or a city, people with autism have a thing called the social battery. And the social battery is where you can take a little bit of power from this battery, this metaphorical battery, and it will help you keep calm for longer or understand the situation better. But what happens sometimes is this social battery can drain and it can run out. And that's where you have situations like a meltdown, or you struggle to cope with understanding the environment or the people around you. So this isn't a physical battery, but it's actually a mental battery, which when overused can lead to situations where you need to go and have a bit of a break, find a bit of space for you, which makes you recharge that battery to be able to cope in those environments. And even though it's not physical and it's mental, it can affect you. Nothing physically different about being autistic, but there is that mental side of things that can be affected. So hopefully that answers your question. And hello to Reddit user. We can't actually say the Reddit user's name because it's quite interesting, let's put it that way. Why are you like this? I think autism and how people are when you have autism or Asperger's is built around the environment that you grow up in. So, for example, I've had really supportive parents, I've had really supportive teachers, support workers, counsellors, therapists who have helped guide me to be the person that I am. And it's never been so much about the autism side of things. Yes, it will affect certain bits like communicating and talking. So sometimes you might hear in the podcast I have a bit of a lisp, or I might struggle to say certain words properly. And that is actually because of my autism. I sometimes have difficulty communicating the information across. But it's all about the environment that you grow up in. And for me, I've been very lucky that I've had a really good supportive network of people from being a child to a teenager and then an adult, right through education and at home. And that's how it's made me the person that I am today. You're listening to That Autism Thing, a candid conversation about autism. Thank you for listening to this edition of That Autism Thing. If you want to find out more information about autism and Asperger's, you can visit the National Autistic Society's website, where they have helpful guides, information and support. Hopefully we'll be back to normal programming next week, where I'll sit down with another family member and find out their perspective on autism and Asperger's. But weather permitting, hopefully we'll be able to record it. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on with the podcast, you can follow us on Twitter @thatathing, or you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Callum Ronan Creative. This has been a Callum Ronan Creative production for the internet.